You are now tuning into the Resilient Podcast. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Resilient Podcast. This is episode 24, and I am your host, Rob Aurelius. You know, it's been a very interesting 2025 so far. 2024 was, and I've said it before, and I stand by it, it was the worst year of my life. And I don't want to sound extremely negative in the beginning of this episode, but it's just the truth. The reason why I'm saying this is because I was able to embrace that last year was not the year that I had planned. It wasn't supposed to go down the way it did, but it did. And something, it's a new year. It's 2025. It is officially now March. So before I say anything further, I would like to say to all the women around the world, Happy International Women's Month. It's one of my favorite months. I love supporting women. I have been very vocal about women's rights for a long time. It is no stranger that I have talked on this podcast about my mother, who I love very dearly. Shout out to my mom, Maritza Torres. I love her very much. My grandmother, who I talk about all the time. I've spoken about my grandmother's story here on the podcast, the last episode with Cornelius, which was last week. Actually, 2 weeks ago was the episode with Cornelius. But, folks, my grandmother, Aura Torres, is my hero. And you know how people say they have idols and they have, people that they look up to. My grandmother is that person. She's my role model. She is the love of my life, my first love, and I will always love her. So shout out to my grandmother as well, Aura Maria Torres, aka Mamasa. She was everything for me. And my goal one day is to create a foundation in her honor where I can handle many causes, whether it's mental health, dementia, which is the disease that unfortunately took over her. And that's how she passed away, from a big, long battle with dementia. And maybe other causes that are dear and near to my heart. But I wanted to get that out of the way because, there's a few months in the year that are very special to me, like the month of September for pediatric cancer awareness, October for breast cancer awareness month as well, too. And, so many months, and especially May for Mental Health Awareness Month. But, overall, these are causes that are dear and near to my heart. Part of the reason why I created the Resilient Podcast And, to go back to what I was saying, 2024 was not what I expected. I have been able to embrace it. I am somehow working on moving forward. And this is exactly what this episode is about. So in this episode, we're going to talk about Philly. We're going to talk about submersion and moving forward. So in this episode, I want to talk to you all about going to Philadelphia. I was in Philadelphia yesterday, and it was the first time that I was in Philadelphia in 2025. So yesterday, Friday, March 7th, I was back in the city that has brought me so much. A city that has given me incredible joy, but also deep heartbreak. I found myself submerged in emotions I wasn't fully prepared for. And the reason for that is because with March 21st, which is in 2 weeks, marking a year since our breakup, returning to Philly brought back everything. The love, the loss, and the memories that still linger. It was also my first time, like I mentioned, back in the city in 2025, because the last time that I was there was briefly in October when I was on an 18-hour road trip from Atlanta back to New York City. And while I plan to return next month to film parts of the Resilient Project documentary, like, the ending of it, I realize how difficult it is to exist in a place that holds so much of my past. I was talking to my therapist, and I was talking to my friend James on the phone, and we were talking about a few things. And my therapist recently used the word submersion, and it resonated with me deeply. Sometimes healing isn't about avoiding the things that hurt us. It's about fully immersing ourselves in those emotions, feeling them, and then learning to navigate them in a healthier way. Those are some of the things that my therapist and I discussed. So when I was out in Philadelphia yesterday, because I'm back home now, I realized that this trip was a moment of submersion. It was a chance to confront my emotions head on and redefine what Philly means to me. Because, like I've stated before, the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, will always hold a special place in my heart. So, moving forward, that friend of mine that I talk to sometimes about my healing journey reached out again. And the only reason why I haven't mentioned this friend's name so far in the podcast is because this friend of mine said to me, whatever you do, don't mention my name on the podcast. And I said, why not? You're my friend. You're special. I care about you. I love you. I've known you for some time now. My friend's like, I appreciate it. And the feeling is mutual, but I think it's best if you don't mention my name, not so much for my privacy, but because I want you to keep it special. And I was like, okay. And, my friend asked me, like, before my trip, my friend was like, hey, like, how's the documentary going? And I was like, good. We're almost done with it. It's almost coming to an end. And my friend was like, really? So you started filming what, in April? I was like, yeah, I started filming in April, and we're gonna be done with it, shortly after my birthday, perhaps. And my friend was like, wow. So about a year and some change of documenting. I was like, yeah, I wish I could do it for longer, but um, I'm becoming resilient. And, when I go to Philadelphia next month, all I have in mind is to somehow close the book, finish the chapter, and finish the story of resilience. My friends, one of them in particular, and my therapist said to me, Rob, take your time to heal. Take your time with everything. Don't listen to people in the sense of when they tell you to move on, don't move on because someone's telling you to move on. And I remember saying to my friend, Estefania, I'm going to give myself a year. But, in a year, actually, next month, will make a year since I last spoke to my ex. Well, communicated with my ex. April. After I had dropped off those gifts, everything just went downhill. The message that she left me that night when she realized that I had left her the gifts, I was literally on the Amtrak back home. And then I took a few days to respond back to her because I had to process everything. And after that, that was it. Never heard from her ever again. So I need to mentally prepare myself for the next 2 weeks because the 21st is going to be a difficult day for me. It is going to be officially a year since my ex-girlfriend and I have broken up. So my friend, called me this morning again. And they were like, hey, I know you said you was going to Philly. I believe you was out there yesterday. And I said, yeah. I was like, are you back home? And I was like, no, I'm actually checking out of my hotel soon. And they're like, when will you be home? I was like, early afternoon. And they're like, okay, cool. So my friend goes to me, what made this trip to Philly different from past visits? And I said to them, well, this was my first time back in this year. And I was confronting memories, emotions, and weight of this upcoming anniversary. And, I had spoken to my friend about submersion when me and my therapist had discussed that topic. So my friend goes to me, wow, okay, I'm sure you was out there, trying to figure something out, right? Like trying to see if you could talk to her, something, whatever. Did you reach out to her while you was out there? And I said, nope, I did not. Didn't reach out to her. But while I was out there yesterday, I felt that I was close to her. I felt that she was close to me. I felt that she was in my heart. I felt that her soul was there. And I was with Diego, and Diego was looking at me the whole time like, oh, you all right? And I was like, yep. Just processing, just still digesting all of this. So my friend goes to me, you was telling me about this word submersion, and I looked it up, and I wanted to know how the concept of submersion related to this experience when you went out there yesterday. And I said, my therapist explained that sometimes we really need to fully sit in our emotions. And that's what I did. I sat in my emotions instead of avoiding it. And, returning to Philly forced me to do just that, to feel everything one more time, to process it and understand where I stand now. And my friend was like, whoa, okay. And my friend's like, so, what emotions do you think are surfacing as this 1 year anniversary since you guys broke up is approaching? And I was like, well, March 21st is a date I've dreaded. And even though I've done a lot of healing, this trip reminded me that grief and love can coexist. And my friend was like, oh, wow, that's true. Grief and love can coexist. I'm like, of course. So my friend then asks me, how do you handle being in places that hold painful memories? And I was like, that's a very good question. But, I'm learning that places don't have power over me. They should never have power over me. My perspective does. And, by immersing myself in these spaces instead of avoiding them, I can start reclaiming them. A place may give me like some bad memories. And originally I will say like, most people will say things like, I'm never going to go back there again because it's going to give me a bad memory. But, sometimes we want to go down memory lane. Sometimes and I've done that before. I've gone down memory lane. In 2023, I was on a date with someone, which is crazy. And I dropped her off. This is in the beginning of 2023. This is way before I met my ex-girlfriend. And I dropped this girl off at her house. And, she initially wanted me to come in and spend the night with her. But she's like, we just met. And I was like, yeah, of course. I was like, I was not expecting to come into your apartment. I just wanted to make sure that you got home safe. And here you are in front of your doorstep. I'm just going to wait for you to go back in that door. And then I'm heading back to the train station because I had dropped her off in an Uber. And then I was like, I haven't been to Ridgewood in a long time. And I spent a long time in Ridgewood, almost 2 years of my life when I was dating an ex-girlfriend back in the day. And it's crazy because while I was in the car, in the Uber, with her to drop her off, I was thinking about like, I'm going to be in Ridgewood. And I don't know how far I'm going to be from my ex-girlfriend from 2011's old apartment, but I'm going to go down there just to, she doesn't live there anymore, obviously, because, by the time we broke up, she was back living in Jamaica, Queens with her family. But I was like, that place brought so much fond memories to me. It's pretty much the place where her and I started our relationship. We actually started dating. We asked each other out right outside of her apartment. It was like a warm, New York City night. And that was the night that we officially started dating. So when I went there and I dropped her off, I said to myself, you know what? You just dropped off someone that you might have a new beginning with. Why would you want to go down memory lane? The past is the past. Like, she moved on years ago. She's been married ever since. She's had another child ever since. Why would you go down memory lane? And I did. I still went down memory lane. So I found the street. I walked down the street. I literally missed the apartment because I kind of forgot. I don't remember the address, but I was like, look, if I see the door, I'm going to remember the door. And I got to the street corner and I realized that the barbershop that I was going to when I was out there living with her is down the block. So I actually said, oh my God, I passed it. So I went back Finally saw it, walked up, wasn't able to go into the building, of course, but I was able to open the front door and I looked in and, I didn't want to seem like a creep, right? Like in a building that I should not be in because that's considered trespassing. But I looked around and she lived on the first floor. And I remember saying, man, this is where she lived at one point. This is where I lived with her. And as I went back home, I kept thinking to myself, am I satisfied? I went down memory lane. Did I get what I wanted? Why did I do that? And I remember asking myself, did you do that because you still care about her? And then I said, I'm always going to care about her. I haven't seen this woman in years. I don't love her anymore. I have love for her still. I'm always going to have love for the people that I dated, no matter what. Even if we're on bad terms, I'm always going to wish them well. That's just the person that I am. But, there's been other times in my life that I've been down memory lane for certain things, for certain places. A few years ago, I was part of a Sweet 16. And, during high school, I went back to revisit one of the locations that we went to for the photos that we took. And it was by Verrazano Bridge Park. And I did it just to like reminisce and see if it could take me back. And I think that most times we do that as people, as humans, like, especially like if it was a childhood memory, we sometimes go back as adults to see if we feel something, or sometimes we go a few years later or a year later, whatever the case may be, to see if we feel something, So sometimes going down memory lane could be a good thing. Sometimes going down memory lane could be a bad thing. For the most part, if I ever go down memory lane and I feel something, I just leave it there. I leave it there, and I just don't, I don't visit it again. So I was explaining this to my friend this morning. My friend was like, I'm not going down memory lane. There's no reason for me to go down memory lane, but, to each their own. But they're like, I respect, how you feel and why you do it. And, everybody's different. So my friend asked me, so listen, Philly is like engraved in your heart forever. And I was like, I know, right? Because look, after me and my ex broke up last year, I had to keep going to Philly. All I kept thinking about was Philly. And look at all the things that have happened with Philly. The Eagles won the Super Bowl. All I kept thinking about was her, that before the Eagles won the Super Bowl, that plane crashed in Philadelphia near her residence and where her mom lives. And Philly just cannot leave my system. It just can't. So Philly right now is memory lane. And my friend goes to me, so look, what role does Philadelphia play in your personal journey right now? And I said, well, Philly is more than just a city to me. It's where I experienced some of the most happiest moments, believe it or not. And it's where I found the greatest love that I've ever felt for someone romantically, emotionally. Philly is the place where I met the person that I thought was going to be my soulmate. And, all of that, aside from the love that I have for my grandmother, like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode. So that's why Philly will always hold a special place in my heart. And there's nothing I could do about it, to be honest. This city gave me love. It gave me passion, grit, purpose, even if things ended with heartbreak. The last episode I was with Cornelius and we were talking about the theme of dynamic. So I didn't really get the chance to talk about how February was for me. But February was painful because I was like, February 13th, I was in my feelings. And I was like, man, it's been officially a year since I last saw her. And then the next day, the Eagles had, the parade. And I was all the way out in Washington, D.C. and Virginia for Valentine's Day. And again, I was thinking about her the entire time that I was out there. Because, it was also her dog's birthday. I miss him so much. I miss his bark. I miss his spontaneousness. I miss, he's an old Yorkie, but, one of the cutest dogs I've ever came across. And, I loved him as equal as I love my dog, Bobby. And my dog, Bobby, his birthday is actually coming up. His birthday's on the 13th, March 13th. And by the way, speaking about birthdays, my baby niece, she just turned 1 year old. And man, I love my niece. Just thinking about her right now, thinking about her smile, thinking about how cute she is. She's one of those blessings that came to me because, like I said, last year was a bad year for me. But before my ex and I broke up, God brought that beautiful child into my life. And I've been learning months later how to appreciate her more because I was so depressed. I didn't really get a chance to enjoy her last year. And can I say that a few weeks ago, well, it was last month in February, I forgot what day it was. I came home. I think it was after my trip to DC, and my mom was there. My mom was visiting us, and I saw my baby niece walking. And it was the first time I saw her walking, and oh my God. I told my sister, I think I'm about to cry. I was like, I know you told me she took her first steps around December, so she's been walking for some time now, but it was the first time that I saw her walking. And man, I was in my feelings. I love my niece so much. So, my friend goes to me, all of this stuff is deep. Rob, all of this stuff is so deep. Like, the reason why I check in on you, the reason why I talk to you about these things is because it's just so deep. And this is like a movie sometimes. And I'm like, yeah. I was like, doesn't it feel like a movie to you? I was like, it does. I'm like, it feels more like a music video, one of those love songs. Like if Brian McKnight, Donnell Jones, New Edition, Michael Jackson, Drake, Mary J. Blige, Alicia Keys, and a few other artists got together and just made one duet. And the song was about resilience. That's how it feels to me. So my friend goes, while we're in the subject of Philly, how can you move forward while still cherishing the good memories? And I said, look, I don't want Philadelphia to be a city that only reminds me of loss because it should not be that way. I want to reclaim it for what it truly is. And surprisingly, that is the city of brotherly love. I found love in Philly. I lost the love from Philly. Philly's always going to be a special place. And, one of the last things that my ex said to me, actually, this was the night that I left the gifts for her in front of her house. She had said something to me like, I know that you was in town, and, when you're out here, I just want you to enjoy that space. And I was like, yep. Initially, I didn't say anything to myself about that, but eventually I said, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to enjoy that space when I go out there. I'm always going to think about her when I go out to Philly. While I'm on that thought that my throat's a little dry right now and I feel a little bit of inflammation because I did have a Philly cheesesteak yesterday. And, cheese causes inflammation all the time. I have this nice formula from Nala Health that is called inflammation. And I took a little bit of it before I started this podcast today. And like I said, if you guys are looking for phytoceuticals or formulas like CBD to help you with optimum health and just natural holistic medicine, don't forget to visit. It's right here, nalahealth.com. When you go on the website, Nala Health, and you select the items that you want, and you're in checkout, use this coupon code right here, TRP10, and you get 10% off your order every single time. Courtesy of the Resilient Podcast, the Resilience Tribune, and yours truly, Rob Aurelius. I did mention the Resilience Tribune. So last month we had such a beautiful story by a very nice person that I came across on social media who is a big supporter of the Resilience Tribune and the Resilience Project and the Resilience Podcast. Her name is Melinda, and she wrote a beautiful story. And if you actually go to our website right now, resilienctribune.com, right there under my finger, go to publications, and you will see her story about resilience. And we have another story coming up for the month of March from a very nice person who also connected with me because of the Resilience Tribune. And, she was already a supporter when I started the podcast and whatnot. I'm not going to mention her name. I'm going to keep it a secret. But her story is going to be featured later on this month. And I hope you all enjoy it as well, too. But folks, if you want to be on this podcast, don't hesitate to reach out. As you can see here on the bottom, it says follow the Resilient Podcast on Twitter, aka X, and Instagram at The Resilient Pod. Contact me there. Reach out to me. Let me know that you would like to be part of the podcast. And if you want to share your story about resilience, I am cordially inviting you. And if you don't want to be on the podcast, which is fine, but you want to share your story on my publishing platform, The Resilience Tribune, reach out to me at info@resilienctribune.com. It's right there on the screen. So let's talk about some closing thoughts. Now that this episode is coming to an end, this trip yesterday to Philadelphia reminded me that healing isn't about running away. It's about submersion, about allowing yourself to feel everything and come out stronger on the other side. Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, which I have been talking about so much on this episode. Then again, Philly is part of this episode. has shaped me in ways I never expected. Never expected this. And while it carries both love and loss, it's also represents resilience. So as I open up about this emotional return, and I discussed with you all the power of submersion and how we can learn to navigate through places that hold both love and pain, I want to say that I am proud of myself for being able to go to Philadelphia yesterday and do what I needed to do, despite of the fact that I was thinking about her, thinking about Taryn, thinking about her mom, thinking about the memories, thinking about everything that was special to me when I was out there. You know, we used to go to Wawa and get these drinks that she loved with foam. There was this one pumpkin drink that I used to get from Wawa, and I haven't been to a Wawa in a long time. Yesterday was the first time that I went to Wawa since like last year, when I went to Philadelphia in August, you know, to relive the 1 year anniversary of her and I meeting and eventually dating. And I had that drink and I was like, man, I remember when I used to get this drink a lot. In a way, it's good that I don't drink that drink as often anymore because it's super sugary. And of course, I've mentioned to you guys before that I'm diabetic. So had I still been drinking that, my sugar probably would have been still high. But, you know, we used to go to Paul Revere, this beautiful Italian place where we used to get really good pizza. We used to go to this place called Delco to get these margaritas called Chi-Chi's. And I used to get cigars from there too, because they had some cigars that were factory cigars from Drew Estate, one of my favorite brands. But, you know, I never took any of those things for granted. You know, those trips that we made to Marshall's, Big Lots, just for us to get stuff that we needed. I never took that for granted. And, you know, last year, I was able to take a trip out to Drexel Hill, which is the neighborhood that she lived in when we were together before she moved into her new place, closer to the Northeast. And, you know, I went out there with my friend James. We were, you know, James had a doctor's appointment and I accompanied him. And Diego tagged along, and, you know, Diego always travels with his camera everywhere he goes. And, you know, we actually shot a scene of the documentary out there. And when I went out there to Drexel Hill, James was like, "You really like it out here?" And I was like, "Dude, it was quiet. It was peaceful. Her and I used to walk the dog out here every day when I was out here with her. And she taught me something valuable, which I initially didn't really understand. But there was poles around where she lived, and she always said to me, don't split the pole. And at first I was like, what? But, you know, as a man, I've always known that when you're walking on the sidewalk, you never let the woman face the side that's facing the street. My mom taught me that when I was a kid. And I've always wanted, even if it's a female friend of mine, I always keep her on the sidewalk side, not on the side that's facing the street. And I would do it with all the women that I dated. And I did it with her. And then I also learned not to split the pole. And even though a lot of people never really understood that whole thing, like, what the heck does that mean? Don't split the pole. Look, Apparently, it's bad luck and you don't split the pole. The next time I speak to you guys will possibly be the 1 year anniversary since her and I broke up, which is March 21st. I will do my very best in that episode to hold my composure, because I've been doing good for myself for a while now. I haven't been crying as much. I haven't been as sad as much because, therapy is helping. I'm doing things to heal, to not feel pain. I deserve to feel happiness. We all do. And folks, as we come to the end of this episode, I want to mention that with everything that's going on in the world right now, in this country especially, with all these things that are happening, my message to the world is, do not live in fear. Do not allow others to control your happiness and your faith. Your happiness and your faith is controlled by you. And I want you all to always remember that. Don't ever let a single person on this earth, no matter who it is, make you live your life in fear and control your faith in everything. With that being said, this concludes episode 24 of the Resilient Podcast. I look forward to episode 25, which, by the way, I will have a special guest on. And always remember, my beloved friends, to remain resilient always. I love you all from the bottom of my heart. And until next time, see you next episode. Peace.